Uh, Now we go to the third presentation by Claudia Matus, making comparable national and international student assessment, the Chilean case. Claudia, bienvenida.
Thank you very much. I will share my presentation.
Yeah, whenever you want, you can start by sharing your presentation. Yeah, it's starting now. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Let me yes. Well, thank you very much. I will try to show the studies we perform at the National Educational Quality Assurance Agency in Chile. All the work we have done making comparable national and international student assessment in the elementary and secondary level. Well, first I will speak a little bit about why a small country like us wants to participate in international assessment, and in terms how they promote our national assessment. I will present the study we done, the goals we try to achieve with those studies, the methodology we use, and some results. Well, Chilean students participate in international assessment because we want to know how they are learning relatively to international assessment. Chile is a very small country and we are in the bottom of the world, literally. So we are very isolated, and we want to compare our curriculum with the international agreed relevant knowledge that should be taught at school. So we want to have reference point for our national assessment by participating in international assessment, and to measure competence, attitudes, and knowledge that we can measure in our national assessment. And not very importantly, to enhance the technical property of our national assessment tool. We have a ride of national assessment that goes from elementary to secondary level in 4th, 6th, and 8th grade. And sorry. So the goals of our assessment are to monitor student learning, to measure school curriculum coverage, and to define educational policies. And we use this for accountability and support to the school, and to inform all the educational stakeholders like parents, teachers, and principals. Well, sorry. Okay. What we are done. We had made some linking between international and national assessment using teams in 4th grade, and we try to do some psychometrical investigation. Then we have performed some score alignment and prediction model using PISA and SIMSE at the 10th grade, and we have performed some PISA and SIMSE trend analysis. Where were the goals of those studies? In TIMS and SIMSE, to verify the test score and the item parameter invariance of both tests. There is always, we are a low performing country, so there is always the question about how international tests are useful for us, in terms that we only have students in the, let's say, not in the whole range of the scales of the international scale test. So there is always the question about, well, there is really invariance in terms of the student scores and the parameters of the test. So we can really apply those tests to our population. So we want to try to compare the psychometrical quality and characteristic for both assessment, whereas there's always the question too, that's if our national assessment are as good as the international ones. And then since we want to make some standard or benchmark in our national scales, how do they compare with the international ones? And both way to locate the international benchmark into the SIMSE scale and to see how the SIMSE performance standard are located on the TIMSS scale. For PISA, we want to make some alignment and prediction model. So we want to inform our school how they are performing in terms of international scales. So we want to set some concordance table, because both tests are not measuring in the same way the competencies. So we know that we could not do really equating, but we only can try to construct some concordance tables. That's mean, well, one score is about another score in both tests. Well, and for us, always to predict some PISA result for the new student cohort, because the SIMSE test is applied every year, and PISA is applied every 3 years. And we have we wanted to know if we can predict college access and retention using PISA, our SIMSE national assessment, and the national university entrance test that is performed for another other institution perform it. So we want to know which of the 3 tests was more appropriate to predict only retention of the first years, and how they will predict the access to college, because we had the national university entrance test really define the selection of the career. So it's a very important test, but we have some concerns about their appropriateness. And we have performed some SIMSE and PISA trend analysis to see if the scoreable evolution from both tests are aligned or not. Well, what methodology do we use in our study? Well, there is very psychometrical work, because teams use the same model, item response theory model as SIMSE, so we could make both. We really can put the same test in and make a free concurrent calibration. So that's mean items from both tests, we put it in the same scales using the team's sample. We have to say that the coverage of both tests are not exactly the same, but both tests are curricular, and both tests are intended to measure some areas that are pretty much the same. Well, so first we make the free concurrent calibration. That means we put all the items together and come up with some parameters from both tests in this concurrent calibration. Then we put we perform a calibration using the SIMSE item text. That means we put TIMS in the same as the SIMSE scale, and then we did the other way around. That means we put the SIMSE items using the international parameters, calibrated parameters from TIMS. So we put SIMSE in the TIMS scale. For the PISA SIMSE alignment prediction and trend analysis, since we cannot for the cohort we use, the PISA and SIMSE do not use the same IRT model. We make some equipercentile models for obtaining concordance functions and table for the 10th grade student samples. We participate in those years with a national option in PISA that's sample a 10th grade student sample, not only the 15 years old some international sample, let's say the regular PISA sample, but in addition to that, we sample some a 10th grade student sample, so it's comparable with our 10th grade SIMSE test. And we use concordance function. Using the concordance function we find in the equipercentile models, we predict PISA in this year 2012 score and SIMSE 2012 test score, and quantify and characterize the tertiary education students' self-exclusion. That was one of our main concern in the access to tertiary education in Chile is somehow stratified by socioeconomic status. So we wanted to know if from the student that we don't want to go into college, how many of those students really perform well at PISA and SIMSE, so it could be a good where we were lost to the college. So we wanted to know how it was, how this population was. So we predict tertiary education access and first year rotation using logistic model, using PISA, SIMSE, and the college entrance test. And using descriptive statistics, we examine PISA and SIMSE score evolution for a 10-year period. Well, what were the results? Well, in SIMSE study, we use the TIMS sample. So it was a representative sample for 44 graders. Well, we got correlations between the parameters in their original and concurrent calibration pretty high. So in the difficulty parameters, the correlation between the original, that's mean in their own scales, and the concurrent calibration for teams were 0.82 and for SIMSE for 0.99 for the difficulty that's the highest, and they will become somehow less lower than on the others item parameters. Well, graphically, we can see that. So that's the 0.82 correlation, and that is the 0.99. Well, that is not surprising because, well, that's mean put the SIMSE and the TIMS item together and to come up with difficulty. The only thing is showing that effectively the SIMSE test, the SIMSE item difficulty test were very appropriate for the SIMSE population. And the TIMS difficulty for the SIMSE population were quite good, appropriate for our population. We would do expect that because TIMS was is an international test, though it has to come up to try to measure in an international range of difficulty. But we were very happy that SIMSE items, the difficulty of the SIMSE items, even though if we would put in the same scale of the TIMS items, we perform very well, actually. Well, for the discrimination, the association was somehow lower, but in fact, for some items, it was very different. And well, that was expected. And with the guessing parameters, of course, there is much more dispersion, and that was expected. Well, but what we really wanted to know is the SIMSE item difficulty parameters were as good as and covers all the range of the TIMSS scale too, and we find that yes, there was some concentration in the more not so difficult items, but even though we have some items in our own assessment that are as demanding as some from TIMSS. So we were pretty happy to see that our items for a national test, some of them were as demanding as some international tests. Well, in terms of the student score invariance, we got better results in terms that all the correlation between the scores, well, in the original scales, the correlation between SIMSE and TIMSS is pretty high, 0.2, and the correlation, even if we put SIMS and TIMSS in the same scale, maintain almost a correlation of 1. And even if we put SIMSE on the TIMSS scales, we got the same ordering. That means that both tests give us the same information in terms of order of the students. Well, and if we put TIMSS on the SIMSE scale, we got a pretty high correlation too. That means that was a very research was comforting results in terms of what the conclusion we got from the TIMSS and from SIMSE were pretty much the same. And what we were looking for too was put the benchmark, TIMSS benchmark, onto the TIMSS scales. So we could do that. Well, we have two standards, performance standard for our SIMSE assessment, and it is only two special points. That means was elementary and adequate. So we could match how those scores are in the international scales, and we could see that our standards are pretty much are not so low in terms of the international scale. That's what, so we can set up standards looking at what the international community said that is intermediate or high, let's say, and not low. That was one of our concerns. Well, in the PISA SIMSE score alignment, we made it in reading and mathematics because we use a score. We use two cohorts, and we could determine how PISA score correspond to a SIMSE score in reading and mathematics, and we could match the proficiency levels in our SIMSE score. This was very useful for us because this alignment helped us to set performance standard for our SIMSE national assessment to see well, because there is the level 2 is what is expected in PISA, so we could set our national performance standard accordingly to an international benchmark, let's say. This, as I said, the concordance function were used to establish performance standard for 10th graders, and the elementary standard was located inside level 2 for reading and mathematics, and the adequate standard was located in level 3. That's what we decided that was a good national standard, performance standard. And this study allowed us to estimate also mathematics preparation for the test for the Chilean high school, because we could see that we have two cohorts, one that was prepared to the national, because at this point, not all the 10th graders were taking the national test. Only it was one year and not the other year. So we could compare using PISA and using as PISA as a reference point, how the students that were not taking the national SIMSE test, but they were taking the PISA test, were performing, and we found that they were performing not as good as the ones that they were supposed to perform the SIMSE national test. And this was one of the reasons to influence in a public policy that say that, well, okay, we have to have we will have to measure all the years, every year, let's say, in the 10th grade, because, well, we didn't have before all the resources to do that. Well, and we want to make some SIMSE prediction. Let's say, well, we try to use SIMSE, make the prediction. In this case, we made the prediction for 2012. And the prediction was quite good, actually, at the general level. And in terms of the, let's say, education level of the parents, it was not so somehow good as in the overall, but anyways, we could have our model was okay in prediction, let's say. And what we what we did obtain with our result from our PISA and SIMSE tertiary education study, well, we could determine that 20% of high school graduates performing at level 3 or above in PISA do not enter tertiary education, and this is a big loss, because those students could have has a good opportunity to perform tertiary education with success. So we could determine them, and we could determine how they were composed. So mother's education, household educational resource, household succession, household wealth and cultural socioeconomic index were significantly lower from this group of students than the comparison group that perform at the same level 3 or above PISA and enter in tertiary education. And moreover, we got the less instrumental interest in science or enjoyment in reading than their comparison group. So this gives us some ideas of how to try to engage those students that do not have the interest to enter tertiary education, but do have the capability to do so, to try to enter tertiary education. They feel that their school have prepared them not as well for their comparison group. So we have the study could give us, like I said, some ideas to try to not to lose those 20% of high school graduates that could that could have a good success in secondary and tertiary education. Sorry. And we find out that SIMSE and PISA tests were better predictor than the current college selection test score for tertiary education enrollment. And the 3 standardized assessments performed similarly well for first year's prediction retention. So, well, this study too, let's say, contributed to change a little bit the college selection test that is in place now, and we are not in our college selection test. We are changing the idea of the test and put it a little bit more like a PISA more like let's say, and now we are using methodological tools in those college selection test score test that was not used before. In terms of the trend in PISA and SIMSE, we could say that more or less in reading the trends were more about the same, but we have in our national SIMSE reading test a little bit concerned because we got, while in PISA we have somehow a little bit, let's say we were going a little bit up reading, that was not in our national test. Well, and this make us to think that our national tests we have to make it more enjoyable to the student, has PISA, and this was one of the thing we could determine looking at what the student says about doing the PISA test and doing the SIMSE test. That is, the national test is somehow a little bit more boring for a student because it was more related, it has long readings, more things that are not so interesting. Well, PISA and SIMSE score correlation for 4 PISAs show some declining value for the latest cycle among students attending low and high socioeconomic school. This find promoted a revision and study above assessment reference framework. We could raise several hypotheses and define a study area for addressing this issue, as I said. Well, our conclusion is national, international assessment for us are very complementary tools. International assessment measures student achievement in key contents area that we are not covered in our national assessment. For example, we just only we began to measure science in SIMSE at the secondary levels only, let's say, from 2 or 3 years ago. What we get is from the international assessment is the international benchmark or proficiency level that nurture and help us to develop achievement standard measured by our national assessment. And the exposure to international test development improve the quality of our national assessment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claudia. Thanks for the very interesting presentation.